Good morning and wonderful day to all of you, my fellow humans. Today I would like to talk to you about healing the divide that we humans are experiencing here on Earth. Some of you might notice I'm looking a little disheveled today. That is because I feel called by Spirit to do this video right now, not after I've successfully prepared myself for society's norms. And I think what's more important, and this ties into the message of today, what's more important is the message and the words that I would like to share with you from my heart than our own personal appearances, right? We are so much more than what we look like. And with that in mind, or being said, I would like to talk about the divide, the rift that we as humans are experiencing right now. The difference of opinions, the difference of ideologies, the difference of paradigms or even realities that many of us are living in, and how that has affected us and the strain and stress that that has put on our lives, the relationships that it has broken apart, right? The loved ones that we no longer talk to as much as we used to, the friends that we have had to let go. And while some of this is divinely purposed, right? There is it's a healthy process to ponder the things that are serving us and the things that are not serving us, right? Truly serving us in our divine and aligned purpose versus the things that are not. And sometimes we have to let go of things that we love, and that might be people or relationships or habits or chocolate, or nicotine or whatever it is that you love that's interfering with you becoming your highest and greatest self, right? So I'm not saying that some of these things we've had to let go of aren't healthy letting go. I'm talking about the people whose hearts are hurting for those that they love. And there seems to be this barrier, right, that is preventing that love from being shared. And so this divide, right? What is causing this divide? Part of my purpose here is to speak the really uncomfortable truths. But I want to do that in a way that minimizes triggers as much as I can, so that we can talk about what it is we have to talk about without running away from it. But probably going to be triggered here, right? And so the divide, right? People's belief systems that are preventing them from getting along with each other. A lot of it has to do with politics. And without making an advocation for one political view or the other, I would just say that what is more important than how we believe is how we treat each other. Because if we're not going to treat each other with kindness and compassion and an open mind, then it doesn't really matter what we accomplish in the political realm, right? I would also, what applies is a message from the Tao. And I've shared this before, and I don't remember the exact number of it, and I'm going to speak to the spirit of it, right? Which basically says that be wary of your laws, for those can replace your morals. And laws come from government, right? Laws come from the entities which we give permission to govern us. And so that's why it's also very healthy for us to question the motives and functionality of these institutions and entities and organizations which govern us. Because if they aren't doing our will, then we have the right to remove, alter, or abolish them, right? This is some of the miracle, I think, and it's the miracle of our political system, our political experiment, I'll call it here in America, is that our founding fathers designed our government so that we could protect ourselves from it, right? So that we could protect ourselves from it. I also want to talk about, so I want to get back, right, to some of the things that are dividing us. And I'd like to bring up the topic of war, because it's something that divides a lot of us, right? And I am going to read right out of my little pocket Tao Te Ching today. I'm going to go to number 46, which says, when a country is in harmony with the Tao, the factories make trucks and tractors. When a country goes counter to the Tao, warheads are stockpiled outside the cities. There is no greater illusion than fear, no greater wrong than preparing to defend yourself, no greater misfortune than having an enemy. Whoever can see through all the fear will always be safe. And so what does that mean to me, right? First off, man, there's so much. We could analyze this for so long, right? But no one wins in war. No one wins in war. Even the winners even the winners of the war, how many of their men and women and children have been sacrificed to the war effort? How many orphans do we have now? Widows, widowers. It's really heartbreaking, right? Not to mention all those who live, who survive the war and are now carrying the mental and emotional wounds of the things that they did in the name of whatever propaganda sent them to go slaughter their fellow humans, right? So I would just like to talk about war. I'd like to talk specifically right now about this war in Ukraine and those of us who support that war because we've been convinced that we need to fight that war in order to prevent a greater war. And this is part of the divide, right? That is a reality that some people live in, right? And that reality is doing what? Causing more war, right? I'm going to point out the parody of fighting for peace, similar to screaming for quiet, right? No greater illusion than fear, and no greater misfortune than having an enemy. What does that mean? Well, to me, it points out the purpose for healing this divide that's between us all, right? The purpose for healing this divide is that we are all humans on Earth that are here to experience life, to share with one another this gift of life, to be on Earth, to make Earth better, to experience unconditional love and forgiveness and service and the rewards of service to others, right? But we have become so distracted from that because of these beliefs, these ideologies, these things that have been propped up as so important, right? We'll take another one. The subject of diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? And this brings up a really fascinating point, because here we are, we have to, at face value, is diversity, equity, and inclusion a good thing? Absolutely. Variety is the spice of life, right? Treating us all as we deserve to be treated, as equal beings in the eyes of our Creator, is morally and ethically correct thing to do, including people, bringing people in, accepting people for who they are. This is all absolutely part of God's will and our divine purpose here on earth. Does that include homosexuals and the trans community, the LG? I'm sorry, I'm going to probably offend some people because I don't have all my terminology right, but does that include everyone, regardless of your sexual preference, your religious preference, your color, your skin? What are all of the thousands of things that have been conjured to divide us, right? Yeah, none of that matters. What matters is our humanness and who is in our heart, right? But what has happened? We have taken this, now we apply this diversity, equity, and inclusion to the legal constructs of it, right? The people who are fighting for these things are fighting for them because they want legal equity. Just think about that for a second. Legal equity, meaning the rights of minorities supersede the rights of the majority. The law gets tricky, right? I once had someone explain to me who worked very closely with in the political realm, who was very active and partially responsible for getting the gay marriage legalized. And I was talking to them, and they were expressing how proud they were that they were finally able to change the opinions of Americans enough to make this possible. And I said, wait a minute, stop right there now. You didn't change the opinions of Americans. You changed the law. And when you brought it to a vote, Americans proved to you that they already supported this equality. Most Americans showed with their vote that they already supported gay marriage. You know what you had to change? You had to change the law, which is how it's supposed to work, which is why, thank goodness, in this country we have control and authority and sovereignty over our laws so that we can correct them to align with our needs and wants when we see fit. So what's a really unfortunate manifestation of some of this diversity, equity, inclusion, which I believe in its heart is well intended, right? But we have to be very careful of what our intentions manifest, right? And giving necessary and purposeful positions to people who are not qualified comes with consequences. And we are seeing the consequences of some of those decisions now, playing out right now. We're seeing what happens when the people who are supposed to provide us with safety or leadership have no leadership skills, have no practical knowledge of how to keep us safe, right? And so So I hope that we can see, right, that unity is the acceptance of duality. Unity does not replace duality. Unity does not necessarily transmute duality, but it embraces and accepts duality. Because that struggle is part of what being a human on Earth is, right? Without hot, how would we recognize cold? Without happy, how would we recognize sad? Without the below, how would we recognize the above? And so, without hate, how would we recognize and appreciate love? But we have to be able to hold our own space while also being tolerant and accepting of the other people. And that does not mean that we sacrifice our sovereignty to them. What it does mean is that we allow them to be them in their space, so long as them being them doesn't interfere with me or anyone else being me in my space. And that's where a lot of this legal stuff is causing a lot of problems, and why people have been, in my opinion, genuinely confused by what their rights are. Your rights do not include telling other people how to live their lives. You have the right to be you, and you have the right to defend yourself against anyone who says you can't be you. You do not have the right to tell other people how they should be. History has given us many examples of this, right? I've seen some people say that those who didn't get the vaccine should just be exterminated. Now, I have a question for you. If someone's belief system warrants the death penalty, where does that stop? I think we have, and strangely enough, many of the people who think that way are the proprietors of their own so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I find it very fascinating that so many of the people who chant and fight and rah, rah, rah for inclusion are also uninclusive and intolerant of people that they disagree with, to the point where they would justify death for those people, right? Sounds an awful lot like someone they accuse other people of being, doesn't it? I'd also like to talk about the current political climate and what we're going through here, right? And if, for those who think that the problems of corruption and the problems of the elite and the uber wealthy running the country and making decisions have just appeared since Donald Trump became president, then I respect your right to believe that. But I encourage you to broaden the horizons of your thinking. I'm not advocating for Donald Trump. I don't trust that guy any more than I trust any of the other ones. I do not. There are a lot of red flags. I think we need to be very, very careful here with thinking that this man's sole purpose is to provide America with what it needs. I think we need to be very, very careful here, right? But many people think, oh, but Dan, he's gonna he's going to open up all this fracking and all this oil industry and all this mining. It's going to be terrible. Well, I'm sorry if you think that mining and fracking hasn't been existing until this particular president came along. The problem is that most of our mining and fracking and all this horrible stuff that we do to the earth in order to provide us with all the physical things that we need is done in countries where nobody's watching. Nobody cares. There are no environmental laws. The population is essentially enslaved or indentured to do the work, and nobody sees the gunk running down the river below it because CNN isn't there and Fox isn't there and all these, because there's no cameras there and nobody's talking about it, right? So now, all of this stuff, what is being talked about right now is bringing all this dirty laundry home. Ooh, and we don't like that, do we? We don't like the idea of it happening right here in our backyard. We don't like the idea of our rivers being poisoned. We don't like the idea of our forests being dug up and demolished to provide people with batteries and plastic and fuel and electricity. No. But we're not exactly jumping on the bandwagon to stop using those things either, are we? I mean, what would we do if these little gizmos that we're all watching me bob my head on right now went away? It's an interesting thought, right? So what's happening right now is these things are coming home. They're being discussed to bring home. And like, while I don't want to see these things happen, I'm also not oblivious enough to think that they're just now starting to happen. Right? For those who think that like corruption is just now a thing because one person got into office, one person they don't like. So, I mean, that's fine if you want to believe that way. But I guarantee you that belief system is not going to manifest the change and outcome we need to have a functional country and society in the future. It's not. I'm sorry, because that's not the reality. What else to talk about, right? So just to get back on healing this divide that we're experiencing, how do we do that? We need to be accepting of everyone, right? We also need somehow, so to heal the divide, we need compassion and acceptance for everyone. To create a future where humans can survive on Earth and to provide for clean water and good quality food for our children and our children's children, we need to understand the reality that we're living in. I have a question, right? So with all the clear cutting of the rainforests in South America, right? And probably happening in Africa as well, right? But all the clear cutting of the rainforests in South Africa, the clear cutting of the coniferous forests all across the Arctic tundra, right? What's that region between like where we are now and the Arctic Circle, right? There's that tundra with millions and millions of acres of trees are being clear cut to make plywood. Right? All of the millions and millions and millions of acres of forest land that has been destroyed on this continent, including Canada, right? Due to forest fire, to wildfire, right? So we all do remember that trees produce oxygen. They consume carbon dioxide, which is toxic to us humans, and they produce oxygen, which we need to live and survive, right? The number of oxygen producing organisms, namely trees, is on the constant steady decline, right? And the number of oxygen consuming organisms, namely humans, is constantly on the rise. If that isn't corrected, and I'm talking about protecting and preserving trees, not culling the number of humans on the earth, right? Right? But if we don't stop the destruction and the removal and death of our brother and sister trees, how does the story end for us? What does the surface of the earth look like to our children? Another really interesting thing that I read in a book by Thor Heyerdahl was he was talking about a Pacific island that he went and visited, where the rainforest, all the islands around that particular island had very lush, wonderful rainforests, right? But this one in particular is just desert. There's like hardly even any, there's one meager little contaminated spring and some little like nasty shrubs that grow around there. And he found out from the locals that that island was logged, was clear cut, right? All the trees were removed. And one would think that there would then be excess water so that because the trees weren't drinking it, right? And new trees would come back. Well, what happens in fact is the vacuum, or the suction action of trees drawing the water up out of the ground actually holds the water to the surface, holds the groundwater up to the point, to the surface of the earth, to the point where the roots of the grass and the other trees and the plants can reach it, to where it comes out of our springs, right? So when you remove the trees, you actually remove that force that is holding the water to the surface, and it goes away. And so those of us who are in a burn scar, particularly a burn scar that is several years old, right? We first witnessed, like during the wet seasons, the massive flow of water off the surface, and now it's starting to go away a little bit, isn't it? And so if we don't acknowledge these things, we don't acknowledge the need to protect our trees, what does the future look like when we no longer have water at the surface and oxygen to breathe? What kind of world are we passing on to our children? And how many environmental organizations out there are saying nothing about this? How many scientists are saying nothing about this? How many scientists are actually supporting the removal of trees in order to sequester the carbon and blah, 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 blah? How many environmental groups out there are doing the work to stop the thinning and fuels reduction in our forests that would protect these old growth trees from fire? Where are all the scientists that are and advocates for shaded fuel breaks, which have been proven to work, right? What's happening? And so why do I bring this up? To inspire a little healthy questioning of our realities. And to remember, once again, that if we're going to heal this divide amongst us, we have to allow for other people, particularly the ones that we disagree with, to exist. Because how many conversations have I had with people that I disagree with that like totally blew my mind and opened my eyes to something totally new that I never would have thought of before if I just stayed in my own little safe, protected bubble with all my like-minded friends and everybody who thinks just like me, and we all like pat each other on the back and congratulate each other for being super smart and being on top of our game and for all the wonderful things that we know. That's not how you grow, folks. Right? That's not how you flourish and thrive. That is a breeding ground for groupthink, which most books will tell you is a negative impactor to successful leadership. And so I've rambled a bit here. I hope those of you who have watched this found this interesting or helpful or useful. I hope you've also been triggered a little bit. My intention is to trigger you. This stuff is triggering for me, right? Why am I hoping to trigger you? Because I think it's really important that we all get comfortable with our triggers, right? Our triggers are our guides. The things that trigger us, our trigger is the problem, not the topic. Right? The fact that just hearing about it makes us want to freak out, that's on us. Right? That's not on the world doesn't need to change so that we're not triggered. We need to change so that we can move past our triggers. Right? And so, yeah, I have been not intentionally triggering people, but I'm not avoiding the things that come to my mind that I know are going to trigger people, because I think it's good practice for us to all be triggered. Practice. If we can't go out there and engage in situations that are going to trigger us without being able to calm down and breathe and re-engage in these important conversations without freaking out on one another, then we're not doing ourselves or our societies or our fellow humans the proper service. All right? The only way we are going to solve some of these issues is by being able to come together and talk about it. Excuse me. All right? If we can't discuss some of these really important things, then we're not going to be able to figure out a way to move forward and move through them and make them better. And if we can't figure that out, then Mother Nature is going to do it for us, which is going to be painful. I think the last thing that I want to point out is, I've talked to many, many people about what is happening on planet Earth right now, and just about everybody can agree that the way we've been doing things is not working. And I mean the way we've been doing things for the way society has been progressing for hundreds of years, okay? I don't mean since Donald Trump was elected, right? I mean the way we've been doing, the way society has been progress can be equated to detachment from nature, right? To the point where we see people like living in unity and harmony with the natural world around them. We think, good God, how do they deal with all that dirt? Where do they wash their hands? Ugh, if somebody gets sick, look at the flies. Oh, God, how do they do it? I can't wait to get back to all my stuff that requires the earth to be destroyed in order for me to enjoy the perception of clean and tidy and to numb my mind with my little electronic gizmo that makes life easier for me and gives me something to think about so that I can not have to think about all of the reality that I live in. I totally derailed my own train of thought. What I was talking about, I think, or what I'm going to start talking about again, now that I've derailed my train of thought, is the need for us to question our own ways of thinking, to be humble enough to say, maybe I could rethink this. Maybe if I'm so upset that I think someone else who disagrees with me deserves to be deprived of life, liberty, or their pursuit of happiness, maybe that's on me. Maybe I need to change. Oh, yes, I remember what I was talking about now, right? So where we're heading, things are changing in the universe, right? We are moving into a new age. We are moving out of one age and into a new age. And what that means is that the systems and structures in that old age are coming apart, whether we intentionally dismantle them or whether they have to be destroyed through the natural processes of evolution, right? They are coming apart in order to make room for the systems and structures of the new way of doing things, the unity, right? If we want to live and experience life in unity consciousness, then we're going to need to get rid of some of these things that prevent us from doing that to make room for these new systems that we can use to exist and function in that way of thinking. Okay? So that is happening right now, folks. It is not just happening on Earth. It is happening within our solar system, within our galaxy, within the universe as a whole. The frequencies and energies are changing. The astrological alignments are changing. These things are all changing, right? And there is nothing that we can do to stop it. What we can do is choose to embrace it and to design our life and to figure out our purposes and in order to become aligned with these changes that are happening. We also need to become aware that they are happening, right? And this is part of what has been this is part of what honestly breaks my heart about the climate change and global warming movement or theology, dogma, whatever you want to call it, right? It's not that I disagree. So is the Earth's climate changing? Yes. Has there ever been a time on the surface of the planet Earth in the last 4 point whatever billion years where the climate hasn't been changing? No. So why do we all of a sudden think that like trash is and cow farts are changing our climate right now? Why do we all of a sudden think that the cars we're driving are changing our climate? Is it good? Is the amount of pollution that we put into the earth good? No, absolutely not. But let's be clear. The climate is changing because that's what the climate does. The earth is changing because that's what the earth does. And thank God for it. If the earth didn't go through cycles every once in a while where its inhabitants, namely humans, were mostly wiped off and wiped out, then the poor earth would have been dead a long time ago, right? We humans are pretty ridiculous in the way we treat our mother. So these cycles and these changes are a normal occurring thing. I'm going to get back to the point that I was on. With the climate change dogma and political movement that we're seeing, right, is that what that's doing, it's distracting us from what's happening in that it is trying to convince us that if we just all buy electric cars, everything is going to be great. Instead of saying, look, the earth is going through serious changes here, and our centers of society and civilization, our cities, all right, we're going to have to rethink all of how we do this here in order to stay alive and keep thriving. right? That doesn't bode very well for all the billionaires and gazillionaires and people who are in control that make tons of profits off cities being right where they're at, right? And the amount of water that flows to those cities, all the aqueducts and all the energy grids and all the oil pipelines and stuff, right? We can't be rearranging all that. We just spent the last 100 years enslaving everybody and screwing everybody over to set up these systems to make us uber rotten rich. And we can't be undoing that now because we don't have time for it, right? That's what we're experiencing here. A great example, I'm not even going to go there. I mean, it's just like with Al Gore preaching all this climate change, global warming, sea levels going to rise stuff, and then going and buying a house in Malibu. Right? I mean, are we paying attention to these things? And so what I'm going to bring myself back on topic here. What I'm talking about is embracing this change and not trying to prevent it, because I promise you, and the message, a very clear message, I'm not just going to talk because who am I? I'm just a guy, right? But the message that continuously comes to me when I connect with Source and with Spirit is that things are going to change. And those of us who welcome and embrace and prepare for the change are going to be far more likely to survive than all of those who are unaware that it's coming. Hence the reason why they're not telling you that it's coming. And so, including Trump, he's not telling you it's coming either. However, the dismantling of our current systems is a necessary occurrence. And the reason it is a necessary occurrence is because our systems aren't serving us. Does that mean that people are going to have to go through some really uncomfortable things? Does that mean people are going to lose their jobs? Yeah. Do I support that? No, man. I don't want people to go through that. I don't want people to suffer. I don't. But I would rather us go through the uncomfortable process of ripping the Band-Aid off than to limp this lame dog along in perpetuity till it just collapses dead of exhaustion and non-functionality. Do I think that Donald Trump has his own personal agenda for why he's doing some of the things he does? Absolutely. However, I do believe that as we move through the experience of what is happening right now, some positive effects are going to happen, namely in that we are going to learn about a lot of things. We're going to learn about a lot of corruption. We're going to learn about a lot of waste. We already are. We already have, for those of us who choose to listen and not just knee-jerk response freak out when this information is provided to us, right? We're going to learn about a lot of things that we need to know if we're going to fix this, right? If we are unaware that like billions of dollars are being sent in foreign countries to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion, then we need to know that if we're gonna be financially solvent as a country, right? If we're gonna get rid of the corruption in our country, then we're gonna need to know where it's at on all levels, right? And so I support the things that are happening right now because I think that it is a process, it is a necessary process of awakening and realization and regaining control. Does that mean I would follow our current leader to whatever end? Absolutely not. Does that mean I think that we should? No. But I think that we should take at face value some of the discoveries that we're making along the way and utilize them for the gift of information that they are, and accept our own ignorance. I learn things every day, folks. I'm not here speaking to you because I feel like I'm on some other level where I'm talking down to them. I'm here because my mind is blown by the things that I learn every day. My mind is blown by my own ignorance, and I'm humbled by the people and experiences around me, and I want to share that with my fellow humans and inspire and empower my fellow humans to do that work of humbling themselves and of letting go of our own personal view, our own personal perspective, and broadening that to the greater world that's out there. And so, with that in mind, I wish you a wonderful and blessed day. I hope that we are able, I pray, let us pray. To the Creator of all that is, that goes by thousands of names and is also the unnameable one. Thank you for this opportunity of life. Thank you for our differences and the gifts that those provide. Thank you for all my fellow humans. Thank you for my brothers and sisters of Earth, the animals, the plants, the water, the stones, the air, all of these things that make life worth living and make us able to live here on Earth. And thank you to our Mother Earth, who provides us with everything we need to thrive in her realm, including these bodies that we occupy right now. Please, I pray, for the courage and strength to stand in our truths while questioning our truths and holding space for those that we disagree with. Remembering that everyone has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that happiness and joy are monumentally important in our experience here on Earth. Help us to see the things we have in common and focus on those, while we let the things that we disagree with float away. The things that we have in common, like our desire to be well, our desire to see our children thrive, our desire to thrive ourselves. Help us focus on those desires and not be quite so attached to our desired outcomes as we seek methods to accomplish this sovereign thriving in our lives here on Earth. Amen. Aho. Amangawi, 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 Dinga. Go forth and prosper.